ten tablet, aby sa nám nemohol. Dobre, máme ho. Položím sem.
Čekajte.
Môžeme rovno začať.
Môžeme začať? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are following up on a discussion which was related to Industry 4.0 or smart industry, which of course is very much related to innovation. Our panel, which is called Embracing Innovation, will be actually chaired by me. I'm Peter Balik. I'm from the Ministry of Economy of the Slovak Republic. And our panelists in today's discussion related to innovation policy and the role of the government and of the whole ecosystem in supporting innovation will be Mr. Shaul Freireich from Israel, who is the former deputy chief scientist of Israel, and right now he actually completed work for the World Bank as a consultant in Poland. We have Tony de Koster from the European Commission working for the Director General at DG Connect. He's responsible for digital single market and innovation policy in the European Commission. We have Adam Fless, who is from the US, but originally he's from Canada. Actually, he's from Canada living in the US. He's working for a well-known and globally renowned investment company, a private equity investment company, KKR. And we have Mr. Ratko Mutavdzic in the panel as well, who is the director for Central and Eastern Europe cloud services at Microsoft. He's based in Croatia. And our distinguished guest will today speak about the role of the government and the role of the Commission also in supporting innovation. Slovakia is definitely perceiving the fact that innovation is very important, and we started at the Ministry of Finance 1.5 years ago an initiative which was focused on supporting startups and the startup ecosystem. The strategy has been approved by the government this year, and currently in the role of the Ministry of Economy we are working on the implementation of this strategy. At our Department of Innovation and Business Environment at the Ministry of Economy, we are focusing also on other issues related to innovation, and it is the support of cluster policy and the creation of innovation hubs, creation of connections between small and middle-sized enterprises, between corporates and universities. We are also focusing on supporting entrepreneurial education at very early stages of education from elementary schools in cooperation with the Ministry of Education. And we are also focusing on smart industry or Industry 4.0, which has been discussed in our previous panel by our Director General, Ms. Zuzana Nehajová. The status quo in Slovakia is that Slovakia is lagging behind on innovation. However, we are on a right track, and the government has its priority to support innovation and to support innovation in the industrial sector that Slovakia has been very much focused on in the 90s and before as well. Our role as the government is also to cooperate as much as possible with the private ecosystem and with universities as well. We created several platforms where we are discussing our policies that we are proposing together with the members of the Slovak startup ecosystem, of the Slovak innovation ecosystem, and we are getting feedback and advices from them on what should be done in order to foster innovation in Slovakia. This PP dialogue, public-private dialogue, has proven to be very effective, and we are coming up with very interesting measures to support innovation. Now I would like to actually call up our distinguished panelists to talk about the innovation policy and their point of view on what the government should do in order to support innovation, and what are the policies that we should focus at in order to boost innovation in our country. So first of all, I would like to call Mr. Shaul Freireich to touch upon this point and talk about his experiences from Israel.
Thank you very much. I would like to begin with the expression that has been mentioned several times too many times, in fact, and it's called innovation. So we have to dedicate 2-3 minutes to this expression, saying, what is it all about? First of all, you should know that innovation is an expression that can be measured, and in fact, it is measured. It is measured as a result of several factors that are together affecting innovation. If you are familiar with the EIS, European Innovation Scoreboard, you can see year after year where all European countries are in this range. There is a right-hand range, which is for the leaders of innovation, countries like Switzerland and Finland and Sweden and so on. And on the other hand, you have countries that are lagging behind and needs a lot of improvement. One of them, for instance, as Peter mentioned, is Slovakia, which is not doing so well on this scale of innovation. Once we understand what are the factors that can affect innovation and how are they measured, we can speak more fluently and openly about innovation, because if we want to increase it, we have to understand what factors are composing this single word innovation. You have the World Forum in Davos, which issues a yearly comparison between 140 countries as far as innovation is concerned. And again, you will see where your country is, where Slovakia, and where Israel and US, and so on and so on. So when we are discussing innovation, we have to remember that it is a measurable factor that has to be improved here in Slovakia. I thought to myself, what are the reasons that Slovakia is in a condition that it should take some measures to improve innovation? And we can discuss it for the whole day. But one thing that can be seen immediately is the R&D to GDP ratio, which is a measure of the, generally speaking, the amount of R&D dedicated relative to the GDP. You have the target set by the EU for 2020 of 3%. It was the target set for 2010, and it wasn't achievable then. Another set of targets were put on. Nevertheless, in Slovakia, it's less than 1%. To be more precisely, for 2012, it was 0.82, which is really a remarkable low figure. So at least you have to do it quite relatively quickly, and at least to pass the 1% barrier, which may lead to higher figures. If not, the 3% is not achievable, it's a dream. But still, you have countries like Austria with 2.8%, and you have other countries that you can follow up and see the figures that are much higher than the one prevailing in Slovakia. I would like to conclude my introduction by saying that, as far as I understood from yesterday's discussion, money for R&D, I speak, is not in short. It's available. And the question is how to use it in an efficient way, and we will discuss on that issue a little bit later. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Concluding with money, I would like to ask Adam to touch upon what is maybe the role of the government in your perspective as a representative of a private equity investment fund. What is the role of corporates? What is the role of the government? How should we enhance innovation?
Thank you. Honor to be here, by the way, as the token North American on the stage. So I'll try and be boisterous and annoying and loud. But I'll speak actually more from my private experience than my job. So I've had the privilege to live and study and work in a few of these, hubs of innovation. Kitchener-Waterloo in Canada, where BlackBerry came from, which used to be cool. Silicon Valley now, obvious reasons. Gothenburg for a year. London, went to business school, for financial and other types of innovation. So what I've seen work really well as far as government fostering, is providing the right infrastructure to foster innovation, the right environment. So you need to create the right climate for an ecosystem to thrive, right? I was looking recently at this, trying to educate myself a bit on the situation in Slovakia currently, right? So there was a KPMG report we looked at recently, sort of the state of Slovak startups, and one of the charts that stuck out in my mind was, what do we do really well in Slovakia, and the number one thing we do really well is technical experience and technical know-how. We have very strong universities and a very strong workforce on the technical side. And what do we do the least well was sort of business intuition, which struck me. And I don't pretend to know the root causes. I do know a little bit of Slovakia. I'm married to Slovakia, so I've spent quite a bit of time over the last 10 years in Slovakia. So I have a great affinity for the country. But just based on some of the things we've talked about the last few days, it would seem to me that some sort of a formal fostering of linkages between your strong technical schools and strong business commerce institutions, which could be private or they could be educational institutions. So one of the questions would be, does Slovakia have a strong leading business education system in place now, both for youth as well as for mature folks who want to go back to do, say, executive education, learn about new venture development, startup education. And so one of the ideas would be to foster, on that standpoint, strong linkages between the technical schools and the business community, and or fostering a strong business education environment. Most, not all, but most successful startups have a strong business person aligned with a strong technical person, right? Whether it's Apple or Hewlett Packard or technical and strong sales, marketing, business mind. And that business intuition, it's actually interesting because if you look at that chart again of what Slovakia does really well, you've got the technical side, that's there. But if that business intuition side, if that chart's true, then you need to beef that up. So as far as a government policy perspective, which I don't pretend to be an expert on, but that would be at least where my perception of where the focus should be.
Mm-hmm. We actually mentioned a very important point, the education of business, or the business perception among the youth. Here in Slovakia, based on our assessment that we were doing last year before we came up with the measures in the strategy to support startups, we came to the conclusion that actually the entrepreneurial culture is quite negatively perceived, or entrepreneurship as such is negatively perceived here in Slovakia. And of course, this is something that we cannot really affect by quick win policies. We are trying to focus more on educating entrepreneurial education in elementary schools as well, and we are in discussion with the Ministry of Education. Do you think this is the right direction for the government to get involved in trying to switch the perception of entrepreneurship?
Some of your great young entrepreneurs and incubator mentors over the last few days, they're out there, right? So it's a sense of getting them in front of people, get them in front of the students, get them in front of the youth, get them on TV, get some of your strong potential and over-leverage them, over-expose them, so that people get a sense of, these people are here. You've got great people that have come back to Slovakia recently from experience abroad, and they want to build their businesses here. Mm-hmm. So they need to get their stories out, and other people need to look up to them as role models. Mm-hmm.
Just for your information, if you mention the word entrepreneur and
exactly. So we need a new word. We can toss out entrepreneur.
Us in the Department for Innovation.
A new colloquialism for Well.
Thank you. Tony, you are representing the European Commission here. Of course, we are also in discussion in our roles in the Ministry of Economy with the European Commission. we are working together on the digital single market strategy that you are an expert on in the European Commission. This is definitely a regulation that has the rationale for the European member states to implement and to try to take away the barriers between the European member states. So what should be done by Slovakia, by the member states in this regard, and how should we foster and help the European Commission to integrate the digital market in Europe?
Well, again, very many thanks for inviting me here. And I mean, before we really kick off and say what Slovakia has to do and what the European Union has to do and so on, I think it's good to take a step back and just simply stand still for a second about why this all matters. Why does innovation, supporting startups, R&D, entrepreneurship, why does that matter, and why does that in particular matter for Europe for the moment? And I think because we always take it for granted, but it's important to remind that also that we're still in a very complicated economic context. There is many member states with still high unemployment levels, in particular amongst young people. There's a risk that a part of that generation may be facing major difficulties in accessing the labor market. And that's why this is really important. I mean, in the first and foremost, it's about creating possibilities for employment, for youth employment, and of course, it's also about our industrial leadership. And that's why we're focusing a lot on that. I mean, we're doing a lot in terms of data through our R&D programs, where there is now much more focus and direct funding to the startup community and to member states. Slovakia is a candidate for that, even supporting them in setting up schemes for the national startup, for creating the right environment for the national startup community. But also, as you rightly said, it's not just about supporting directly through money, it's also about creating the right environment. And why at European level do we need to talk about a digital single market in the first place? One, because, yeah, probably we have now a pretty well-functioning single market in the physical world, so we've done away since 1992 with most of the barriers. Some keep on popping up, but then we try to eliminate those as well. But what have we seen happening in the digital world is that, you know, there are new sort of technologies which allow to identify in the digital world where normally the factor distance doesn't play a role anymore, but you can sort of re-identify where a customer, where a person is coming from, geolocalization, basically. And so we see new segmentations of the single market happening in the digital sphere. And that is, frankly, is not acceptable, not just because in the European treaties, since 1957, we have this ambition that there should not be any discrimination on the basis of nationality, but also because this fragmentation of the single market is a major handicap for our companies. The large companies maybe think they can benefit from it sometimes, but for startups which have to be globally competitive, this is a major challenge. I would want to contest that. We have a tendency to talk ourselves down. There is a very vibrant startup community in Europe. There are a lot of places, Berlin, London, Gothenburg, they've been already named, but also Slovakia. There is I mean, you quoted the figures from KPMG. There is a vibrant startup community. 40% of them are active in the sphere in which I work, namely the digital sphere. So there's no lack of that. But still, startups, because of this setup, have a tendency to only address a national market from the outset, which, you know, in the best case is 80 million customers, which is a single market of 510 million customers, of 20 million companies when you talk about the B2B sphere, and we're not addressing it. it's being segmented. So that we have to get rid of. That's a program which we have at Europe. And a lot of that will come through also through for adoption during the Slovak presidency. So we count on your support in that framework as well. So there will be legislation. But there is, as you said, there are also things which the member states need to do at their level. And we can...
That I wanted to ask you about. How should Slovakia position itself during its presidency in the agenda of digital single market? How can be collaborative with the European digital market?
Well, as I explained, the Commission will propose a series of legislative steps, and notably on banning geo-blocking, on reforming copyright in the European Union. Those are important measures, complicated measures, because of course behind that there may be some vested interests. And therefore it will be very important that we have the support both of the European Parliament and from member states. And as a presidency, you of course you will have a critical role to play in conducting those negotiations, and always, as I said, maybe always reminding your fellow member states in the Council of Ministers at European level, yeah, that there may be some vested interests, but there are maybe some overarching economic and political ambitions which we should have in Europe, namely that ultimately this is about fostering, as I explained, growth and jobs, and investing in our future.
Thanks. Radko, you are representing a corporate, one of the biggest companies in the world that used to be maybe a startup 40 or 50 years ago. How are you cooperating with the innovation ecosystem in the Central and Eastern European market, and where do you see the role of Microsoft in collaborating with different stakeholders of the innovation ecosystem?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I don't think Microsoft is really different when you say how you see the role of. I think the companies are now growing in a different way that they used to, like 20, 30, 40 years ago, right? So they also need to build the kind of ecosystems and platforms to thrive on, right? So Microsoft is spending, I think, around $10 billion every year on research and development. But still, they cannot grow only on that, right? So on the new ventures ecosystem today, and it's shifting toward the new ventures, right? So when you look at the big ones and how they grow from the open innovation perspective, for example, they're actively looking at the markets and they're researching, you know, what should be our next step? What should be our next growth? Should we continue to, for example, grow on Windows and Office, right? Or should we grow on something else, which is, I don't know, today, cloud computing and services related to this one? That's a huge step for the corporation. It's hard to do that only from the internal perspective. And I would say that a lot of them actually are looking into the ways how they can interact. You have a corporate programs. I think that every bigger one, every bigger corporation have something like, you heard about them, Microsoft Ventures or Google Ventures. So you're actively sourcing, you're looking for the deals, you know, where you should invest. And not necessarily only in the field of your expertise or what your current business model is looking for. So you can see that especially in the finance world, but they're not really mandating that the stuff which is growing from there should be used or deployable only in our core business. So they would look really openly into, you know, what is the next, because they're building a bigger ecosystem than this one. What's missing from that perspective is that, you know, we should encourage more from the different perspective, including policy perspective, that organizations are spending more time and money into something like this, so that you have this money which is coming from the governments, from the European Union, which supports innovation and growing the entrepreneurs. You have venture capital, which is currently, I think, the biggest driver from that perspective. Even if you look at the numbers, it's not. It's still public. And then we should increase also the spending which is coming from the corporate ventures, let's call them this way, so that people can have more options, you know, how they can grow from there. How a specific company look at this one, you know. It's not that it's massive, it's supported, it's policy. help through the policy or through some regulation. It's things to do. I think you have to do something like that. And I think people should look at every single option and from the equal perspective, right? Depending on where you are at your growth stage. For example, I was, everybody's using that example. I was in Estonia. I was talking to their Technopolis. It's the biggest kind of technology incubator over there, and they have this huge, really nice chart of how we are supporting people in the, in their development phase. And I was surprised, at least that was the first time when I started to for the idea itself, right? So they're investing into primary schools or different incubators, trying to spur the innovation creation, right? They're not really thinking like, oh, now I have the idea, and now I'm going to, invest into idea or at any specific stage of the startup. So there's a lot of options, and I think the corporations are really looking into this one, not that actively that much, big ones for sure, but there's a huge potential, especially in something that we call medium-size organizations, which could do.
We had a press conference with the minister and the representatives of the SPP, the Slovak Gas corporate, and Enel about hackathon. So it's working together with the government and other private stakeholders of the ecosystem, where corporates are defining their specific challenges that they would like to resolve by very innovative and creative ideas that they would like to get from the ecosystem. Does this create actually value for corporates, Ratko? What do you think?
As I said, there are two types of the approaches. So I would say it's so obvious you want to do something like this, like hackathon. But in general, I think that a lot of them are really open. They don't even define their own problems. So we had Microsoft. We had a lot of opportunities to basically use other different programs. That basically use some generic worldwide challenges, like worldwide issues that people have. Like, I don't know, how do we feed people in 30 years from now? There will be like 40% more people on the earth. So how we support that with the technology? Actually, it's nothing really connected to a Microsoft from the perspective, okay, what would be the next business case for us? But I think it's a valid question, and we can help with the technology and money to do that. And just to to finalize, when you look where currently we are contributing the most, from that perspective, actually it's a foundation. It's Bill Gates and Melinda Foundation, which is trying to solve those issues. So how you use that money to really impact and solve some of the things for good. So let's eliminate some of the diseases. That's a millennium challenge, right? Okay.
Adam, you wanted to comment on.
Well, I was going to ask Ratko, how does Microsoft delineate between what internal? So if you're going to do a hackathon, how do you decide sort of what is a public need that you're okay, in a hackathon environment versus things you want to keep, frankly, closer to the chest?
Yeah. So a bunch of years ago, when I first time visited research and development, let's say arms inside the organization, right? I was surprised that they're actually functioning the same way as you would expect some external incubator or research center would do. Some of them from the open perspective, some of them just like die. They research and they die, and some of them became like a global hit. Some of them are integrated with specific knowledge. For example, Israel is having great startups, which we are also like from the perspective of algorithms and some startup elements we can use and build on top of it. But those things stay inside the company because pretty quickly you see what will be the next growth. But some of them go outside. People go outside and they start their own startups. They continue to do work on them or bought because it doesn't make sense. So you just grow them, right? And then you make some of the things public. And usually I'm surprised you can do that when you look at the corporations. Go and research papers to the outside world. How many people from Microsoft, from our research division, actually work with the universities and contribute algorithms and so forth. And you can see there's a lot of developments over there. So I think it's a nice balance how you do that.
Shao, you are coming from a country which is a top performing country in terms of innovation and innovative for many countries here in Europe, but also else in the world. You are actually a best practice in terms of venture capital system. Yeah, as a small country, such as Israel, how to boost investments, how to boost venture capital, how to boost business angel activities in the innovation ecosystem?
I'll put it this way, and to increase the involvement of angels and VCs, etc., is a long process. And I am sure that at least part of the audience here are asking themselves, okay, nice talking, smart guys, but what will we do tomorrow morning? And tomorrow morning, I mean in half a year time or something like that. And what I saw yesterday, and understand that, first of all, the Slovakian people generally are very smart, knowing all the tools available. They have the money to perform. What they are lacking is immediate actions that should be taken. And these immediate actions that should be taken can start tomorrow morning. For instance, if you take countries like Finland, and you take Sweden, etc., you see that they have established agencies that is capable of direct supporting industrial R&D. On top of other missions. For instance, TECES is supporting, if I'm not mistaken, universities project, etc. But I am concentrating on industrial R&D. And this is something that probably your ministry should take the lead. Solving all internal problems that you have here with other formal, private entities like this business association and then other ministries, etc., etc. It's something that can be solved. And the politicians on the higher level agreed that these steps should be taken. So why not to take this opportunity and put it into practice? By saying that, I mean that you have to put an agency capable of doing the whole inside, outside, I don't care, but putting it together, putting the decision-making process into practice, providing the assistance to good projects, according to the evaluation, of course, and benefit for it for the economy of the country.